And it becomes, which is why it became a really fun combo project, because while there's a lot of little Python-y things that we ran into, really a lot of it is an exploration of what MySQL in particular stores and where it stores it about the database itself. And it's different if you're in Oracle or SQL Server or DB2, but generally speaking, the properties and details do exist within the database itself. So you can query it almost in a reflection kind of mode, query it about it so that you can actually pull that, and with some thought, you generate SQL and then execute that SQL against your whatever your target or your destination is. And what you end up getting is something where, probably what you want to do and what you want to think through if you're going to synchronize your database is how detailed do I want it to be? Is it good enough for me to have just the table structures and the stored procedures? And if the tables are basically all empty of data, is that okay? In some cases it is, because you can go in and maybe follow it up with some little like quick test script or something like that. Particularly if you have automated testing and regression testing, then it may be something where you say, hey, all I need to do is just have an empty database that I'm going to create, and then I'm going to run this test script, and it's going to put some data in there for me. And I can maybe even script a couple of bonus things there. And that becomes extremely useful if you run in a situation which I've been to a couple of those, where you're at a job, you're on a project, and you say, hey, I want to be able to I want to be able to create from scratch the database. And somebody says, oh, that doesn't exist. We don't have that SQL. Now you can, in some cases, you can do a database dump and get that SQL where you can do it without the data. But sometimes it's something like this would be a little bit better, approach, where you can bring it in clean into your development environment, make some tweaks if you need to, and then export it or point your documentation tool towards it. So it was sort of there's a lot of high level stuff there, but with the key being to sort of highlight some of the things to think about if you want to synchronize, or if you're putting together processes for promoting databases through your system. And so that being said, questions, comments?
So have you actually looked at something called liquid base, which might kind of simplify that? I don't know if it's just Java based only, but we use liquid based in that allows you to basically build the data, or I guess the table structures in the code. So every time you deploy, it deploys the SQL.
Yeah, there are tools out there that do stuff like this. And it really is, if you're doing it right from the start, you can because liquid base is a great tool for that. And you can also do reverse engineering. Like we mentioned, Django is one. If you're using some of the tools out there, like I think even Hibernate was one that had ways to generate a database. I know there's other, object relational mappers like that, where if you do it right from the start, then it shouldn't be an issue. You should have scripts and changes and migration steps and things like that allow you to maintain your database. But this is also dealing with data and things like that. Like a liquid base is really is much more a structural thing, and not a way to potentially copy data. So this is really like you can use the first bits of this and use it strictly for structural content. The challenge becomes when you want to do more than this, when you want to actually have data to move from one place to another. It's like, how do I do that? It's not like copying a file from one system to another, because now you're like grabbing just bits and pieces and not the whole thing. Or at least, if you do the whole thing, it's like dump and restore. If you want to do pieces of it, it gets a little more complicated.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, good point though. I mean, because like I said, there are some really cool tools out there for that piece of it. Other questions and comments?
Only other thing is, have you also thought about moving your SQL out into like a properties file and load it in that way?
I'm not sure I understand. What are you?
So like within your Python code, you had all the different selects, inputs, and all that. If you put that into like a properties file, you could inject your SQL wherever you want, kind of like a stored procedure, and then just update tokens or update, inject the data you need.
That's sort of what it. That's sort of what it is. If you did it come up? Okay. So like, for example, here, these are, you could, this could easily be, that would be a way to do it. Cause right now, and it's to get into a little bit, is that this is the MySQL synchronized script. So it has MySQL specific stuff. The thought being that if I had a Oracle, then it would be the same stuff, but it would be Oracle synchronize, and then I would do the Oracle specific code within this. Now I could within here say each of these and say, hey, this is going to be a, I could extract that out and say, hey, this is, property X for MySQL, and I could just swap out my settings files. You could do that, but it seems like it's an extra level that doesn't, that wouldn't make, I don't know. I was going to say it wouldn't make it as readable, because it's nice to be able to see right here. It's like, oh, here's what it's doing. This is where I'm getting the data. This is the data I'm pulling from it. And I'm not reusing these too terribly often. So it could be extracted out. I'm not sure I'm not sure if I see enough of a benefit for it, other than if you want to do it a little differently as far as how you are able to abstract and set stuff up. I mean, in this case, it's done through like, hey, I'll have the thought is I would have different classes for different databases versus just different setting files for different databases, which would be possible for itself as well.
Right. No, I was just looking at your source destination. It's like you're duplicating the SQL. So why not just put all the SQL in one class, and that like here's all the SQL in one place, and you just go read it there, and then you apply it wherever you need to apply it.
That's true. And that may be, that may be in particular here, because it's like, it's usually in the same place, but you do see there are like duplicates here. So it's like really the difference between these two are just the name. So it could be something like just, slap that in there and then give it a different, create that as a template and then slap the names in. And maybe it could be reused in places. And that may be something that's part of the cleanup that ends up coming as we get further into it, is it may be like, hey, let's go ahead and take some of these things where we see repeated SQL and clean that up and make that, give that a slicker little interface. So good point.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned that is because you said like that's for MySQL. Well, if you want to go to Oracle, some of those queries might change, but you could essentially take the same queries, just tweak them for Oracle, and then just apply it to a different utility.
Yeah, and that may be something too, where it's one of those where it's useful, sort of like a resource bundle kind of approach. Is that even though it's different classes, that if you take those SQL things and say, hey, these are the query, and take all those and abstract them up to, like up on the class level. And here, where you'd have like, so you'd have like SQL 1, SQL 2, whatever it is, however you call those. And so then when you create the Oracle synchronized class, then you see right there, here's where all my SQL is. So I can just go right here and go through the SQL and change it over to use Oracle stuff. But the thought also is that Oracle or SQL Server is going to be different enough that you're probably going to have to change several of the things that are done. In particular here, because you're going through and you're like, you're pulling results out, and then it's those specific results, which may or may not look the same if you do it in Oracle. So it was left to be more of a logical approach. But there's definitely there's definitely stuff like that structurally could make it easier to maintain and extend. Other good questions and comments? Going once. All right, hearing none. So we learned there is value, which I think we probably knew it before we came in here. There's some very good value to being able to synchronize databases, particularly essentially on the fly. They can also be tedious and complicated. That's why the best solution is to consider these things from the start, and to, with your databases, also have, just like you would any other source code, some development procedures and standards that say, this is how we do it. This is how we version control it. This is how we store it. This is how we propagate it, so that bringing in a new developer, it's just a matter of say, hey, go to this repository, download this stuff, execute these things, and boom, you're off and running. Particularly when you get in the ideas of testing and regression testing, then it may be where it's just like, hey, go load this database, kick off these regression tests. Part of what they do is they build out all your data, and you're off and running. And if you're in that kind of environment, it's actually really nice to be able to essentially create on the fly from scratch a database that's got enough data to do some testing, to do some development, and then it can wipe it out afterwards. Or you can utilize it to do your basic development and have something that's data on the back end that's small and not burying your whatever your storage device is. There's also levels of synchronization and modeling that you need to think about. Is, do I care about synchronizing to development my indexes and some of the things that are really more performance related? Do I need all the data or just some of the data? Can I just make it up, or do I really want to pull data from my source? You can do it simply and not have as many of those details that you're going to worry about. But if you do, and it could be very quick to do so and make it easy to do a quick replication or shadow of a database. But sometimes, because you're not limiting the data that's brought across, it could take up too much space. Or it may be limiting because it doesn't have, you're not syncing the things that are suddenly an issue. Because things like foreign keys and indexes and store procedures obviously can be critical to your application running correctly. So once again, thank you for your time, for going through all of this stuff, for just spending some time to work on becoming a better developer. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you missed that you like to go through more, you can always reach us. Email info@developernoir.com. We have a contact us form out on developernoir.com. YouTube, there's a link here and they'll be in the show notes. YouTube is adding things called handles, and we have the Developernoir handle. So as that, which would be like @Developernoir, sort of like a handle that you would have on Twitter or something like that. As those become fully functional and available, that'll be probably an easier way to get a hold of our page. We're out on Vimeo, vimeo.com/Developernoir. We got a Facebook page, the Developernoir page there, and twitter.com @Developernoir, where we do our regular posts and updates and things of that nature. So thank you for your time again. Hope you go out there and have yourself a great day. And just remember, this is time you're investing in yourself. Our goal is making every developer better. And you are helping not only make every other developer better, but yourself as well. Have a good day.